So many of you know, Teresa and I lived in Japan for a couple of years, and one of the things that we found so interesting, Japanese language and culture has a certain cadence and a certain sense of repetition and ritual to it, and there's a hierarchy of language and so forth, and certain things you're just supposed to do and say. I got myself in trouble several times. Teresa was much better at speaking Japanese, and her vocabulary was much better than mine. Mine was usually really bad because I would ask the teenage kids in the high school to teach me Japanese, and they found that a great joy as they taught me really bad Japanese. You know, teenager Japanese that I offended many people with. But one of the things is we lived in the town when no matter what store you ever go into, any store, any restaurant, any place at all, there are people assigned with the task of crying out to you, Irasshaimase. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this. Irasshaimase, Irasshaimase. And in some places, it's almost, they assault you, almost. And what it means is, essentially, they mean it as welcome. What it literally means is, get in here to my store. That's what it kind of literally means. And they have several phrases like this that they use, that they just, like when you sit down to eat, you say, itadakimasu, I gratefully receive. Is that idea? Itadakimasu. When you're done, if you're in a restaurant and you've been served by someone, you say, gochizo-sama deshita. And that means, thank you for running around. I mean, it's literally what it means. Thank you for running around. If someone's speaking and you need to kind of talk to them or interrupt them, or if you enter, like kids would do this all the time, they'd enter into our classroom to give us a message, they would say, Irasshaimase, which means I'm going to do a rude. That's literally what it means. I'm going to be rude now. And so a lot of these things are so ritualistic, though. What we find interesting is that word Irasshaimase, which is shouted to you at all points in all places. There comes a point where you don't believe it. I mean, you just don't believe it. I mean, especially at the 7-Eleven at 11 o'clock at night when you walk in and they go, Irasshaimase. You know, that kind of thing is going to mumble it under their breath. You don't believe it after a while. And I wonder, what I wanted you to hear tonight, because next week we're going to share something a little bit different when you actually see the Last Supper. And I'm going to add a couple words to it. Probably shouldn't, but I will. But in this one, I wanted you to hear about welcome, about being welcome. Probably the harshest criticism that Jesus receives from the religious leaders is when they say in great anger and in just astonishment, this man, Luke 15, this man actually welcomes sinners and then he eats with them. That's a fascinating statement because in that Middle Eastern culture, you know what that means? We could translate it another way. Not literally from the words, but in the intent of the culture, this man welcomes sinners and honors them because that's how you honored someone. You invited them to a meal. And when you invited them to the meal, you lifted them up. So next week, we're going to see that story of that meal. I'm excited. And it's why, I don't know, in our faith tradition, why we hunger so much and love to come to the Lord's table so much. Because it is our Savior who welcomes us. And you know, no matter what, I always chuckle at this. People are like, oh, I'm not worthy to come and this, that. Don't you think he knows already? Don't you think? And so when we're simply honest with God, Lord, you know I'm unworthy. And he says, I invite you. Come to the table. Come to the table. All you who are weary and heavy laden. Not some of you. But for everyone who comes to Jesus, Jesus welcomes them in. Every single one. Every single time. And that's good news, my friends. That's good news. And I'm so glad that in Lent we get to focus on that welcome and that invitation. So next week, come to the table. All has been made ready.